And this is across the board, Doc. Is this kind of what you've been seeing?
Oh, absolutely. It's the same. I have not been in a state yet where this is not the situation. And by the way, you're using the DS200s. Those are the same things that were used in Antrim, Michigan. And the judge ordered those machines open, and the Telet modem is right there on top.
Yep.
So back up here. Okay, what did you just say? What is that?
So you guys use DS200s as your scanning machines in
our precincts.
And it's an ES&S device, and they ship them standard with modems in them. If a state orders them without modems, they don't remove the modems. They turn them off with a password and ship it. The EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, which is a federal agency, caught them doing this and required ES&S to notify all of their customers that their machines were out of compliance with federal standards because of this. ES&S then says, well, yeah, but they're protected by passwords. Guess who has the passwords? The Secretary of State and the vendor. By the way, the Secretary of State accounts are easily hacked. So the whole state's easily hacked. So the point is, bad guys can remotely turn the modems on. Now, let me give you an example. In Antrim, Michigan, that was the lawsuit with, by the way, anybody can verify everything I'm about to tell you. You just go to DePerno Law, DEPERNO Law, LAW.com, DePerno Law. Matt DePerno is the attorney in Antrim, Michigan, for the Bill Bailey case. And you'll recall that the evening of the election, a bunch of truckers surrounded the precinct and wouldn't let the election workers back in because they didn't want the election workers to go back in and hide all the evidence of fraud. So we got forensic images of those machines before they were tinkered with, and we got the evidence. And when they did a recount, the recount didn't match the machines. And so in the case, and the whole point of the case was we were trying to make that case go statewide because all the systems were operating exactly the same. But the judge ordered, no, this is not a state case. This is Bill Bailey versus the county. Bill Bailey won. We already fixed his election. Case dismissed. But during that process of the case and during discovery, we were able to expose several facts. One of the facts was the judge ordered the machines opened, and there are the modems sitting right there. So when they say they're air-gapped, what they're doing is they're telling the clerks that the machines are air-gapped. Air-gapped means that the machines are behind. That means that there's no connection, no wire connection. There's a gap between the machine and their networks, and they're not connected to the Wi-Fi hotspot in that building. You know, kind of like my phone is air-gapped. My phone isn't connected to my network at home, okay? But the modem that's in the machine can call the cell tower. So even though it's air-gapped, it's not disconnected from the internet. It can easily call the internet, and they do. And we have recordings of that happening. And this is not me making this up. Politico magazine even covered the issue when the EAC forced ES&S to report to 89 of its customers that it had shipped 33,000 machines with this capability. So you can look it up. Anybody can look it up in Politico magazine. It was a public scandal in 2020. And the reason it was still a scandal is because Trump hadn't lost yet. Until Trump lost, remember, who was yelling that we were hacked all the time? The Democrats. Okay, and so in other words, it was being covered in all the media that these machines were all hackable. There was federal testimony happening. There's the case in Georgia. It's called the Halderman Report, where Hillary campaign hired Professor Halderman and his graduate students to analyze every election system in the country. And he showed how everyone is hackable. And he turned that report in court. It was sealed, but it was investigated by the CISA, the Center for Internet Security Administration, and their Division of Homeland Security. And they basically reported that to all the secretaries of states in our country, who now all have had to admit, Yep, our machines are hackable. So in other words, I'm not making any of this up. This is all verifiable with public documents. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just telling you what the facts are.
Right.
Well, and if you go history, ES&S back in, I think it was 2004, first got in trouble for making these machines internet accessible.
The reason they do that is because a lot of people, it's not illegal in every state. And it's awfully convenient to have the machines automatically report at the end of the election rather than dragging a USB drive from point A to point B. And so a lot of states have that feature built in, and it's just easier for ES&S to leave that feature in all the machines and just disable it, quote unquote.
Wow. That is, to have a modem,
Oh yeah.
that's like having an antenna that is easily hackable. That's I
Absolutely.
mean, I'm just breaking that down for, people that may not know really that they even use a modem at home, maybe, or something. I mean, that's trackable. That's like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, it's so trackable. I have a little sensor. I could bring it out, but I have a little sensor. And I met with your Secretary of State. I stood in his office and I held up my sensor and I said, "Sir, your machines are online. I will prove it to you. Let's go and walk. I will stand next to your machines. You can turn it on and I will measure the radio frequencies leaving your machine talking to the cell towers." He was visibly shaking as I was standing there with him.
Oh,
And he was like, and then he was deflecting and saying, "Oh, we'll have to make an appointment for that. I'll put you in touch with my election director." Yeah, fat chance. In other words, it's just going to be deflected. Go ahead.
he spoke at our District 39 convention. Okay, Republican District 39.
Yeah.
30. Excuse me, I take that back. It was 36. I got transferred out at 36 now. I'm in 39. But he spoke and he told us without a shadow of a doubt that they do not give off anything. He said it's simply a device with nothing, no capabilities whatsoever.
He's wrong.
So
He's ignorant. He's either ignorant or he's lying. It's one or the other.
Willfully lying.
Yeah.
Willfully must be
Because-
willfully lying.
Because those machines, and all he would have to do to prove it is open it up.
Let me ask you this. So even in my little town of Ray, North Dakota, 850 people, they had people turned away from voting. 2 in particular were Ray locals. They were born and raised there, lived there most of their lives. Yes, you people in Ray who are watching, it happens in Ray, North Dakota too. I'm sorry.
It happens every county in the country, and they especially pick on the small red counties because nobody looks there.
So
Doc, that's something I want you to hone in on, because Carrie Roller, who's watching tonight, she told me this the election night, and I mean I'm kind of interrupting right now, but I really want you to not forget about that, because I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
I want you to really just talk about it.
Well, you know me, I got a mouth. I'll talk as long as you want.
So these particular citizens, they got turned away from voting because the machine said they couldn't vote.
Because they had
And-
already voted?
No, they wouldn't let them vote. And
Why? What reason were they?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
you
but
know,
the auditor was making calls, and when the auditor hung up the call, they said that they couldn't vote.
That was
Shiloh.
because they must have already voted.
no,
Because you have same-day registration, right?
no. Shiloh, what was happening is they were being told they weren't U.S. citizens.
Oh.
It actually happened in counties across the state, because our Secretary of State's uses the DMV for all the voting rolls and stuff. But people who were literally born and raised North Dakotans and lifelong citizens were being told that they were either lived at the wrong address and had to prove that they were at the right address. There was a lady in Beulah that was 3 houses off in the roll, even though she's lived there for the last 14 years. There was a candidate actually for North Dakota House that was turned away at the polls because they told him he wasn't a citizen. And the story Luke is referring to, I think that was that young gal's first time voting ever, like born and raised out in Dickinson area, and she was told that she wasn't a U.S. citizen.
Well, what's supposed to happen is you're not supposed to be turned away. You're supposed to be offered the opportunity to file a provisional ballot. Then they verify afterwards that you are a citizen or that you are qualified, or it's just a clerical error or something like that. And then they're supposed to count your ballot. They're not supposed to turn a person away.
Well, actually, Representative Rick Becker, he got turned away, and he posted that on Facebook, and because the machines were down, and that happened all
wow,
over.
that's illegal.
It happened in Ray too.
And what he posted is, hey, you know, for people that are professional people, like, you know, I wouldn't, barbering maybe not be real professional, but you schedule your appointments. So you schedule to be gone to go vote. Well, how now I don't get to vote today because it's on you. Like,
so they didn't have a paper ballot back up there. They only had all electronic.
No, it was the poll pads themselves were down.
Oh, that's how they do the sign-ins. Yeah. Well, they should have just kept a manual list and let them voted, and then filed and voted provisionally. That's what they should have done.
What's funny about that is the county posted a whole big thing on Facebook about how the poll pads were running an update at that time, and that's why everything got held up.
People don't understand this. I tell people this all the time. The poll books absolutely are online in real time. And the excuse they use is, well, that keeps people from voting in more than once because they can vote in multiple precincts or something. The poll books are online. Nobody denies it. The first thing you do when you set up the poll books is plug in the Wi-Fi hotspot.
Well, and that's what's funny is that comment went up. People got screens of it in less than, like, I think it was in under half an hour. It got pulled back off of Facebook. Like, just boop, gone. So I mean, I got a screen of it. I can send the guys here. It's just I'm using the phone that it's on. And then the other thing that was happening, there was, I know 10 and 21 ran out of paper ballots, so people were forced to use the electronic poll books.
That's illegal.
And there was some other stuff that happened. It was a crazy day on Tuesday. It was very, very dark.
Yes. What it's amazing to me, well, I'm kind of glad, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean it in a productive way, because as America sees that this whole system is botched and there's no way to use electronics in a safe way, then maybe we'll all convert to the way they do it in Europe, where they vote on one day in person with a photo ID, paper poll book, paper ballot. They count and tally and report the tallies in one day. In other words, they can do the election in one day. Why can't we? We spend billions of dollars weeks before, weeks after, and we're still arguing about it 2 years later. And there's no paper trail. Whereas in Europe, you've got a complete paper trail. If you got a problem, you go back and check. Okay. Now, I'm not saying there's no fraud in that system. There's always a fraud. But having it electronic allows me from Ohio to hack into your machine and change your election. Having it on paper, I have to go there and break in and do stuff. Go ahead.
What's even scarier, though, is if there's no paper, there's nothing to preserve, there's nothing to audit.
Exactly.
Because presidential elections is what, 20 months that they have
22.
Non-presidential is 18.
I don't know that. I don't know that one.
That's what North Dakota is 18 months. They got to hold on to those ballots.
Yeah.
And if
there's no paper trail, it's the North Dakota nice again. You guys just believe and are also, but I think it's North Dakota duped.
Yep. Doc, I think you're absolutely correct. Because there is no paper trail, what do you reference?
There's no way to audit it.
Doc, if these here are all receipts.
Right. Okay? You can check everything.
Yeah. So everything I do is digital on the computer.
Right.
On my for banking. Okay. All of these are bank receipts that I put in every week for the last, I don't know how many months.
So you can audit yourself. Perfect.
So I can audit myself.
Yeah.
I have to have these, after what happened in Canada, the IRS could come in and say whatever they wanted to say. Say, hey, yeah, well, no, I've got the copy here. You can switch anything up at the bank, but I can go to the bank with these hard numbers. It's that simple. And people are not understanding. And then the state government comes in, and our secretary did this, and he dupes people into saying, well, come on. I mean, this is our elections are one of the most valued attributes in our country.
Absolutely.
With people lose faith, and I'm losing faith
The whole
for good
country's
reason.
losing faith.
Absolutely, they are. And our Republican Party is so out of touch with people that they don't have a concept of hey, the lowest, the Dickinson Press, I'm from Dickinson, North Dakota, Doc, has a paper. Marvin, you've probably seen it. The Dickinson Press came out. We have the lowest ever voter turnout in North Dakota's history.
Yeah.
And
People are
if you-
losing faith.
Absolutely.
Now, let me tell you how to battle that. There's a county in South Washington. It's the southernmost county called Clark County. Their conservatives got organized and they kept it under the radar. And then during the primary, where Marvin was, they turned out 70,000 more people than anybody was expecting. And they overwhelmed all the cheating and they won. They swept everything. So there's hope for you. You don't have to just throw your hands up and give up. The turnouts are so low that the bad guys are going to be expecting low turnouts and they're only going to stuff according to that. So if you guys can get organized, keep it on the down low, get organized and turn out in a massive wave, you can overwhelm the cheat. And
that's what we've been saying this whole time, that we don't need term limits. We need people to get involved and show up.
yeah,
That's what we need.
So, Doc, could you explain that a little bit? When you say they got involved, what did these conservatives do in that district? If you don't mind just sharing that with us.
well, they brought together several grassroots groups. And it's, by the way, and that's very exciting to me, it was through the churches. The churches got together. I mean, it's just like in 1776. Where was all the action? In the taverns and the churches.
That's right.
And so the churches, they all got together and they said, we're just not going to tolerate all this abortion stuff. We're not going to tolerate all this, innie versus outie stuff. We're not going to tolerate all this. We're going to not tolerate the CRT stuff. We're not going to tolerate this anymore in our community. And they organized all the people in all the churches and they turned out in this massive wave nobody was expecting, and they swept. And I mean, North Dakota, you guys are probably some of the reddest people in the country, okay?
Truthfully.
But your legislature is not red. Because you can't get elected in your state without an R in front of your name for the most part.
That is correct.
So you pretend to be an R, you get elected, and then you act like a D. And then the elections only kind of reinforce that, because guess what? Now you're the one elected. You get to make the new laws. You get to make the rules that keep you in office. So that's the problem. And we either have to throw the buggers out, impeach them, and you can do that too. That's important. You can impeach them, or you got to overwhelm the system. You got to overwhelm the fraud.
Well, in our legislators, we have to recall, but any of the statewide races, like our governor, our DPI, our Secretary of State, our Attorney General, are all impeachable because they are a statewide office. So at that point, we need legislators that are willing to stand up, bring facts forward, and prosecute, and to do it the right way and not turn it into a circus.
I agree with that. I one of the things I've learned, I've met with about 24 secretaries of states now. I've testified before multiple legislatures. And what I've learned is that none of that stuff is very effective. It's important that we do that because it keeps the pressure on the top. But what's actually working around the country is when the local grassroots teams push on their own community. So I always encourage people, don't try to fix your state. Try to fix your own heart, get your own heart right with God, and then work on your own city and your own community. And then what's happening is as communities are being revitalized and as communities are awakening, then that's percolating up to the state level. And that's what actually works.
Amen.
And that's something I talked about a lot when I was on the campaign tour. Like, your township's your most powerful level of government, and people don't understand that.
And your sheriff is super important. You guys have constitutional sheriffs in your state? I don't remember.
We have a couple. We have a handful.
Corey.
Yeah,
Or-
we have a handful. There's actually another one in the Beulah area.
You
as
only
well.
need a handful. You only
Yep.
need a few because they have the legal authority to actually step in. And
Absolutely.
once they step in, once they interpose themselves,
Everybody else will demand it.
then it. And by the way, I was in California all last week. I've been in 25 California counties now. We have 6 sheriffs in California. We have canvassing going on all over the state, and we're finding fraud everywhere. It's big. That state's going radioactive. They've been under tyranny a lot longer than you, so they're already kind of motivated. They just needed to know what to do. And so I've been out there coaching them in that. I'm not taking credit. They're great patriots. They're doing great work. They just kind of needed to know which direction to aim their weapons.
Dr. Frank, I like you a whole lot more knowing that you are a spirit. You have your spiritual glasses on, and you're seeing this in real time. I just had a pastor come in to my barbershop yesterday, and man, the Spirit of God just bam happened right then and there. And I told him the real revival is going to be behind the pulpits of this country. That's the real revival. Our country is a Judeo-Christian concept. That's
Preach
what
it,
it
brother.
is. And if you do not understand the Bible and the principles of which it stands for, all the stories of which it's new and old,
Yes.
you are not going to comprehend what we're talking about. You just are not. You're actually going to turn into a libertarian is what's going to happen. You're going to turn into a flat out libertarian. And that didn't work for the French Revolution. That was a bloodbath. It was a bloodbath.
I'm a heart libertarian, but I'm a republic. I believe in a democratic republic.
Right. Well, libertarian ideals are
Yes.
Republican ideals.
I agree.
But yeah, absolutely. But
Yes.
what I'm saying is the French concept of the libertarian,
Of course.
you are certainly not that.
No.
Might makes right, et cetera.
No.
And
I'm glad you noted that I was a Christian because I am. I'm also a scientist, and I'm unashamedly both. And I think the revelation for me in my life was when I started reading the actual patriarchs of science. If most people learn about Newton, they learn about Copernicus, they learn about Galileo, but they never actually read what they actually wrote. If you read what they wrote, those guys were devout Christians.
absolutely.
My favorite example is Newton wrote more on Christology than he wrote on physics. Okay, but we know him today for his physics. So my point is, when you actually read those guys, they weren't casual Christians. Their science was driven by their faith. So same way with me. I love science and faith. They just go together like vanilla ice cream and chocolate syrup, baby.
There you go.
Sir Isaac Newton, his whole concept of science was to prove the evidence of God. That was his thesis. That was
Read it. It's right in the introduction of Principia, right there.
So as soon as people want to talk Sir Isaac Newton to me, I'm like, let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
His Christology was pretty far out there, but nevertheless, we're off topic though.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
But I mean, just looking at those, so look how heavily Galileo was persecuted by the church.
Yes. He was sort of not very smart about it, but he could have managed that a little better. Like Copernicus managed it a little better. He was out in the country with his own small parish, with his own observatory. So they didn't persecute him as much. Galileo was kind of more like me. He was a little bit of an iconoclast, kind of a jerk.
So jumping back into something you said earlier, and Carrie Roller brought this up to me, and she said it's not the cities where they're cheating. They don't have to cheat in the cities. They're cheating in the small counties, in the small towns.
Yes, that's true.
Dr. Frank, could you please expound on this?
Yes, I would. And before I forget, I just wanted to applaud Marvin's initial comments. The reason he ran wasn't to win. I mean, it would have been nice if he won.
Sure.
The reason he ran was to engage the process. And I totally applaud that, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to thank you for that. But anyway, now back to the small. Let me give an example, because I think sometimes examples are better than explanations. So in the state of Nebraska, they had a ballot initiative in 2020 to make gambling legal. And they're like super conservative state. Nobody expected it to pass, so nobody was really paying attention. But it won by a tiny margin. So some of the citizen activists were concerned about that. Like, how could this possibly happen? So they went around precinct by precinct, wherever they could get cooperation from the clerks, and got to look at the ballots. And what they found is in precinct after precinct, there would be something like 20 ballots that didn't have anything else voted on the ballot, just that one issue. And so, in other words, you can win a statewide initiative by just sprinkling a little in every precinct, and nobody notices it. If you tried to stuff it in a massive way in one of your big blue counties, then it would be easy to find the cheat. By sprinkling it around, nobody, I mean, what's a small clerk going to do? They got 1,000 total ballots in their whole county or their whole precinct, and what's 20 ballots here or there? They don't worry about it. Doesn't change the outcome of their election. What are they worried about? Wow. But you see what I'm saying? So they can sprinkle it around and nobody pays too much attention. And that's how they won statewide in Nebraska.
So when you say they, who's they? I mean, who's the grand master, puppet master? I mean, I imagine you get the question occasionally.
Every place I go.
Right. So who's they? And I don't want you to jump off track of small towns, counties, etc. But who's they?
Well, let's just look at it this way, Luke. Look at your Bible. It's greed. Greed is what drives all this.
That's correct.
That's true. But
who are the greedy ones is what Shiloh's at. Yeah, that's what you're asking. All right. So I have direct evidence on a few people. I can tell you names. So, for example, in 2002, we have a television program, I think it was 60 Minutes, where they were interviewing Soros. And he said by 2020, he was going to own every Secretary of State in the country. Okay, so that's pretty clear evidence that he's busy behind the scenes, yes. In Pennsylvania, since I was working with the state legislature, I got access to all the logs. So I got to see who was logging in. I got to see the login credentials, who was logging in and then manipulating the rolls to accomplish these goals. And I was shocked to discover it was the Hillary Clinton campaign. And I was like, what? This is 2020. Why is the Hillary Clinton campaign hacking into the rolls? They weren't hacking. They had credentials. Why are they accessing the rolls and making all these changes, which are obviously not accurate changes? The legislators explained to me that in 2015, during the campaign, the Pennsylvania state legislature paid the Hillary Clinton campaign to develop an API. It's an application interface. Programmers know what that is. It's like if you go online and you fill in a form online, an API was written to do that. Takes the data and puts it into a database. It's an interface for you. It's an application interface. So the state of Pennsylvania, and they made a big deal out of it. It's in the newspaper. I saw some of the clippings. They made a big deal. We're paying the Hillary Clinton campaign to make it easy for us to get everybody registered to vote. Well, in that process, they ended up giving the software developers complete access to the whole database. And so so you're asking who they are. I've told you one, Soros. I've told you two, the Hillary Clinton campaign, who had the access. And then three, the CTCL, the Center for Tech and Civic Life. That's the Zuckerbucks. That's not a hypothesis. We have direct evidence. We have emails between the clerks and CTCL where they developed a lot of this. We have, you've seen the movie 2000 Mules. The sheriffs have been arresting in some of the states. The sheriffs are arresting those mules, and the mules are reporting the NGOs where they got the non-government organizations where they got the ballots. So the sheriffs go there, they arrest the people at the NGOs, and the NGOs say, yeah, the postman brought those ballots, or the printer brought those ballots, and the money came from CTCL. So in other words, there's a trail. And I could give you more. I could give you example after example after example where we have hard evidence that's been presented in court or in formal testimony before legislatures, which proves that the Zuckerbucks and Zuckerberg was extremely active and paid for a lot of this. Go ahead.
So, Center for Tech. I got to throw a huge shout out for Charles in 2020 because
Charles Tuttle.
He grabbed onto that Center for Tech and he lives with every auditor in the state. Like, they were refusing to answer the man. Like if he was calling, it wasn't getting picked up. The thing I was working on was trying to find out who was passing the information along, because our Secretary of State's office was telling us, oh no, we didn't have anything to do with that. And finally
I have an answer to that. Go ahead, but let's hear yours.
An auditor get back to me and send me an email that said, we were passed this information from the Secretary of State's office. We were told to apply for these grants from the Secretary of State's office.
Yes,
and
that's true.
And so, like, while Charles was just hammering down on these auditors for what they were using the money for and everything else, like, there was a lot of people that were working behind the scenes. Like, I know there were some legislators looking into what was going on with that too, because everybody was alarmed that we had Facebook in North Dakota. And so, like, to finally get that answer back from an auditor, like that, you get a little satisfaction when you get that. Finally, you get somebody good that comes back to you. And back to your other thing too, just throwing in my 2 cents here, and then I'll let you keep going.
Oh, everything you're saying is great. By the way, everything you've said so far is absolutely consistent with everything I've seen everywhere else.
The other thing that I had noticed back in 2020, and this is what really got me on where my questions came from 2 years later, I had always said if you wanted to prove fraud in North Dakota, you didn't look at Bismarck, Fargo, or Grand Forks. You looked at the small counties. I found one county that, according to the Secretary of State's office, had 1,581 eligible voters. Ballotpedia, believe it or not, showed them only at 1,200 eligible voters. So I called the auditor, one of the few good ones in the state. I'm not going to call out which county.
You're smart. Don't do that. Don't Peter them. We could say that. Don't do that to them.
I had them verify their eligible voter rolls, because according to Ballotpedia, out of that 1,200 voters, they had 1,093 people vote. So 91% voter turnout in a small county.
I don't buy that.
And so when I called the Secretary of State's office, they informed me that the auditor didn't know what the eligible voter roll was, and they'd given me the wrong number.
Yeah. So
that was back in 2020 already.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is not new. This has been going on since the 1990s.
Yeah.
I've one of the nice things about working with Pennsylvania, the legislature, is they gave me all the historical data of any county I asked for. And so I got to track all the way back into the 90s for Montgomery County, where I was working, and it's clear as day what they're doing there. And I was able to find historic. There was this one day I found this collection of voters, and I was like, what the heck is this? It was about 10,000 people. And I brought it to the attention of my team, and they said, oh yeah, we already know about that one. That was a lawsuit that was filed in 2012, and they convicted a guy of harvesting ballots from a bunch of rest homes. So it's not, the math works, and we can go into the past and find it.
And the primary of 2020 is the exact example of what I was scared of, because they shut down all of our polls through executive orders.
Yep.
The interesting fact there, again, Charles, I mean, the man has been working. He actually sued the Secretary of State's office for Executive Order 2020-13, which shut down our polls. The day of the court case, the day it came to court, the governor rescinded it under Executive Order 2020-39. And so when Charles and I think Roland was involved with that lawsuit too, got to court, the judge threw it out, said, oh, well, it doesn't matter because the order's rescinded now.
Right.
Interestingly enough, though, you come into October of 2020, the governor reissues executive order, but it's 2020-13.1, allowing these counties to go back to early counting.
Yeah.
Now, while all that's going on,
I remember that.
Our county auditors and everybody else are telling us that they're not counting early. They're just pre-processing the ballots. They're opening them. They're getting them ready to count. Well,
that's not okay either.
Well, while I was on the campaign trail, I had made some phone calls out to Cass County to ask about approval ranked voting, because they passed it in Fargo. And I was curious how it worked. And I got an auditor that actually told me, he like slipped up and told me that they had counted early in 2020 per governor's orders.
Yeah, right.
But the thing is that bothered me is I verified it with the Cass County election official. I have recorded all of it. I have an hour worth of recording of them talking.
Yeah.
And when I talked to her, first, they were counting in the office, and I questioned the social distancing, and then they had a block of rooms, and then it changed again, and then all of a sudden they were doing the vote counting at the convention center at the Ramada in Fargo. But both of them verified that they started counting 5 days plus prior to the election. They were already counting ballots.
And that should not be. That's a bad thing. That should be illegal.
Yep.
Well, completely. It would just take a slip up of anybody, to say what they need to do.
The best part, Luke.
Somebody posted a minute ago about the census, and and you don't technically. You guys don't keep a voter roll in your state. And your Secretary of State was arguing with me about that. But I pointed out to him that on the official Secretary of State website, it says that you have 104% of your people are eligible to vote. And he said, oh, no, that can't be because we use the census. So I showed him the census numbers from the official census. And no, you guys have more eligible voters than the census says. It's more than 100%. So I think all that is a whitewash so that nobody audits anything. They just say, y'all come out and vote, and then we'll tell you what the answer is afterwards. You either should have rolls or you should have photo ID, and every person has to vote in person. But you can't do this in between thing where just everything's squishy. It's a bad setup.
Well, according to some of the numbers that Marvin got from the county auditors, the ones that did respond to him, and the Secretary of State, there was
big discrepancies.
Right. They didn't add up at all, did they, Marvin?
Not a single one.
I mean,
and that's not unusual. Every county in the country is like that.
We're talking anywhere from 50 to 1,500 votes.
12,000 in Burley.
12,000?
12,000 in Burley.
There you go.
I see Mary's question here about what do we do now?
Yeah.
What I did is I worked in a small county, for example, in Nebraska, a tiny county. They only have 1,500 total voters. And I met with the county clerk. And before we met with her, one super mom, I called her, I gave her a list of doors to knock on. And she went and she knocked on the doors, and she found 18 people who voted in a way that they weren't supposed to be able to vote. And then we brought those to the clerk, and we showed these to her. And we said to her, these people all voted. They all received a ballot, a mail-in ballot, and turned in a mail ballot. And it shows in the rolls that a ballot was received for them and counted. And she said, no problem. She says, I keep a list because it's a small county. She says, I mail out every mail-in ballot. There's nobody who gets a mail-in ballot in this county that I didn't mail them. I even initial them. And then I keep my list here in handwriting. I keep a handwritten list. It's, this is one of those 70-year-old white-haired ladies that'll break your back if you cross her. I mean, she's been managing her elections for a long time, right? And so I'm sitting there across the table from her, and we say, well, what about this person right here? And what about this person right here? And she's like, that can't be. And she got her list. Absolutely. And we went down her list. These 18 people had voted in her small county. And these are just the ones we found. There are going to be more. These are the ones who voted in her small county, and they had received their ballot by mail, not from her. And then they had voted by mail. And boy, was she angry. So now what did we just do? The reason I'm telling this story is because Mary's asking, how do we fix this problem? That clerk now has to admit that despite all of her controls and all of the attention that she's putting on her election, somebody else is cheating her election, and she's not in control of it. She's not happy about it. She's pretty angry. So now we can and by the way, in that same meeting, we had the sheriff there, and he also got to witness all of this. So now you've got the sheriff and the clerk in that small red county. This is where the solution is to our whole country. That small red county, they're like, we don't want to use the state system anymore. I said, exactly, because that's how they're cheating your election in your own small little county. Don't let them cheat your election anymore. All we need is a few of those small counties to get together, and their sheriff has constitutional authority to interpose himself between that county and the state. He has federal authority to do so. He can say, guess what? I'm locking up those machines because I see how that's stealing our elections. Or we're going to print a paper poll book and we're going to manage it ourselves. That's all you need to do is a few of your counties to step up and say, we're not doing it anymore. That's starting to work. It's not 100%, but that's starting to work in South Dakota, which I went to North Dakota with you guys. And the next couple of days I was in South Dakota. They've got a couple of counties there that have gotten rid of the machines. Now that's only half the problem because you got the rolls still online, but progress is progress, right?
Okay, so question, because this has come up a lot for me. There are counties in North Dakota that want to get rid of the machines. How do the citizens come forward? Because you're going to help a lot with answering this question. How do the citizens come to their county commission?
I don't know.
This is super important. Can you guys hear me? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. This is super important. His question is dead on. How did the citizens come to the clerk? So if you remember, right after 2020 election, there was a lot of screaming and yelling, demanding audits and everything like that. That's completely ineffectual because the clerks believe their systems are good. The sheriff says, give me evidence. Nothing happens if you just demand. You got to have evidence in your hand. So this is the way it works. I've done this all over the country. I know this works. We get the citizens to knock on doors and actually find the fraud. You find people who will sign an affidavit swearing they didn't vote, yet there's a ballot that was counted for them. You get people to you knock on a door and you say, "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It says here that 6 people live here and 5 of them voted, but there's only Mr. and Mrs. Smith that live there." And Mr. and Mrs. Smith will sign an affidavit swearing that those 3 people don't live there and haven't lived there for decades. So the point is you collect actual fraud. Once you have actual fraud in your hands, and you only need half a dozen citizens or a dozen citizens that actually have real fraud in their hand, you get the sheriff to confirm that they're not quacks, that they're, it's not Dr. Frank the conspiracy wacko coming into town. They found it themselves with their own hands. They take that to the clerk and they can say, here's the fraud. Now they have ammunition. That's when you can get the clerks and the sheriffs to listen, but not beforehand. If you go beforehand, you're just a conspiracy wacko.
For Ray's comment here, is it legal for one county to have 5 polling locations for one district and 0 polling locations for another district in the same county?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, legislation was passed to allow the absentee ballots. There was a big pushback in 2018, especially in our rural areas, because they're having issues finding election workers. If you guys want polling locations in your county, in your town, we all got to step up and say, yeah, I will help.
Preach it, brother.
Back in. I will help be a judge. I want to be involved. That's the only way that we get our polling locations back, because we should drive 120 miles to go vote.
So that he's absolutely put his finger on the absolute problem. We have been paying other people to run our government. We've been paying other people to teach our children. We've been paying other people to run our elections for too long. We've become apathetic, and we made our own bed, and it's a big mess.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So now what we really need, it's a reawakening. It's not just a political activism reawakening. It's a spiritual reawakening. Yep. We've lost our virtue as a culture. I mean, Benjamin Franklin said that only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. We're losing our republic because we've lost our virtue.
Absolutely.
And if there's any doubt in your mind that we've lost our virtue as a culture, we don't know the difference between an innie and an outie, and we execute babies in the womb, okay? Yep. If there's any doubt that we have lost our virtue as a culture, Amen. All you have to do is look at those two. You don't have to go any further, Amen. And you know we lost our virtue. Amen. So what's happened is we've become apathetic. We've been paying other people to do what we're supposed to be doing with our own two hands. We're supposed to be running our elections with our own two hands. And until we do, we deserve the consequences.
Well, and not only that, we've turned a lot of things over to people, such as our schools, our kids, our up and coming generations.
Yeah.
Just like you were talking about. And you know what? Even to a point, some of the churches, some of them haven't done their part either.
It's too many of our churches are apostate. We're in bad shape.
Yep.
Doc, have you ever read the book, The Fourth Turning? Have you ever read the book, The Fourth Turning?
No.
Okay.
But I'm aware of it.
It is an amazing book. And what you said about a great awakening, I would recommend everybody read this book.
Yes.
If you can see this.
Yep. The Fourth Turning.
Yep. It's an amazing book, and it's talking about the awakening generation.
Yep.
The Great Awakening is what literally our founding fathers came out of.
You're exactly right. The first Great Awakening, George Whitefield, up and down the east.
Boom.
Exactly.
Yeah. Boom. All of our founding fathers, even the atheist, the two atheists, credited the 1776, the what we declare.
Yes.
The awakening, the Great Awakening
Yes.
is what triggered the mind to do that. You cannot go back to what we had.
You're right.
Without a spiritual awakening of
You're
the
right.
mind. That's
God's either going to judge us or redeem us. And I think it's just a spiritual war. I was just in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the Black Robe Regiment fired the first shot heard around the world. It's the Black Robe Regiment. Okay. It's the churches led that, but something amazing happened while I was there. The packed house. It was a great turnout for the event that I did there. Half of the people in the audience were Chinese because they left China to come to America to escape communism. And they're watching it happen all over again. So they are activated. It's awesome. It's the first time that's happened to me in the country where I've had such a clear demographic group like that. Most of the time, and it's not the kids. The kids across our country have no idea what they've lost, what they're losing. I sound like my parents, right? And remember when we were kids, you're old, okay, boomer, you don't know what's going on, but our kids don't have any idea what they've lost and what they are losing rapidly. So hopefully, it's sort of like a person who's a drug addict, right? You hope that their life gets so bad that they hit bottom and they say, I don't like it here anymore. And they come out. You pray for a shallow bottom. I think as a country, we're still headed down that bad slope. It's going to have to get worse before it's going to get better. But as it's getting worse, people are waking up, and people are waking up faster and faster. And that's my job. I've been throwing gasoline on those bonfires. I'm trying to get people to wake up faster.
So Doc, if I can just, I'm going to just give a big shout out for the book, The Fourth Turning, because oftentimes, so just jumping back real quick, in 9/11, when the Twin Towers came down, the dogs got so depressed because all they were finding was remains of human beings and pieces of that the dogs actually suffered from what
post-traumatic stress.
That's what it was. Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't go do their job anymore.
Wow.
So they had some basically animal psychologists come in, animal experts, I guess you would say. And they came in and they started hiding firefighters that were all tethered up and whatnot. And everybody would rejoice. And the dogs got excited about going back in the job. So I see conservatives sometimes where all we talk is doom and gloom, but we don't talk about the answer. And of course, the answer is Jesus. And I mean, there is no ifs and ands.
Unashamedly about that.
That's the answer. But the book, The Fourth Turning, is talking about every fourth generation, 80-year cycles. Okay.
Yep.
So 1776 happened right here.
Yeah.
1776, we just kind of boom, and World War II brought us to the very top. Tough men make for
Tough.
Good times.
Yeah.
Good times make for weak men. Weak
Yeah.
men make for bad times.
Yeah.
That's in really
Agreed.
this. So here's World War II, the greatest generation. Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation.
Right,
It's a
right.
must read. Here he is up here. The next generation was the boomers. Oh, what a black eye to
Huge black
America.
eye.
And then from there was my generation, the Xers. And
I was
so
right in between those two. Yeah.
right. Okay. So, and
Right on the crack.
the,
I can't make up my mind whether I'm a boomer or the next generation, but I don't like either one of them.
and so as we turn, the millennials are right here. And Charlie Kirk, who is somebody I absolutely adore, he would be a wonderful candidate for president someday. Charlie Kirk said something, and I didn't read the book Fourth Turning yet, and he said the answer generation is the millennials. They are the saving. They are the why. What is going on generation? And I was like, how could this be? The reason why the millennials are saying, hey, the government should be paying for my college,
right,
is because they were lied to by the government. They were lied to by government schools. Let's not call them what they're public schools, because they're government indoctrination schools.
Right.
True.
They lied and said, hey, if you go to college, you're going to make 6 figures. You're going to drive a pink, convertible. Every Barbie will get her Ken. Every Ken will get her Barbie, and you'll have a pet dragon living in your backyard. That's what they said. So, boom, it didn't happen. So now they're saying, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. And then they're saying, why would we pay Social Security? On the Social Security site right there, it says it's not going to be there for us.
Right.
It's going to be tax subsidies at that point. So this generation is actually the same generation low point of 1776, where we start to climb up. So I
That's
couldn't
the bottom
agree with
I'm
you.
praying for.
Yes, we win. I mean, this is a good thing. I'm kind of off subject here, but
No, I think you're exactly on subject, because that's what the elections are a wreck, not because our elections are a wreck. Our elections are a wreck because our culture's a wreck. We've lost our virtue.
That's right.
Go ahead, Marvin.
And what I was going to get at is, if you're a student of history, on average, an empire lasts, with the exception of the Chinese empires, 250 years.
Yeah, we're there.
The Roman Empire's biggest downfall, the end of the first age of the Roman Empire, was literacy was at an all-time low.
Yep.
Because people were too engrossed in entertainment.
Yep. Too comfortable.
And where we're at right now, we're at that precipice again, where we're in that right time frame where our children, they're not our future. They're our right now. If we're not teaching them what they need to know, they won't be able to stand on their own when they need to. And so, like, my oldest daughter, I'm proud of my oldest daughter. She's 23. The kid is fierce. And it's not even because she follows my ideals. It's the fact that she is willing to stand on her beliefs and argue with me and have a reasonable conversation as to what she believes, instead of just pointing fingers and calling names. And when we have our kids that are willing to carry on those conversations, whether it's politics, whether it's family, whether it's faith, whether it's religion, you have to get rid of that taboo. We have to be done with the taboo of politics. We have to be done with the taboo of church. Like, we want to improve our country, if we want to improve our counties, if we want to improve our towns, we have to have these conversations that for the last 3 decades have been, oh, you don't talk about politics at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
No, this year, you better be yelling.
That's how I end every one of my talks.
It starts at the kitchen table.
I tell people they have to be annoying.
It starts at the kitchen table. It really does, because that's what we've gotten away from it. And you're exactly right. You and I were talking about this earlier, about us as a society have been told not to talk about politics and religion, had to avoid it at all costs. And in all actuality, that's what we should be talking about, because as a society, many people can't take the emotion out of it and have a conversation.
Right.
Take the emotion out of it, have a conversation, and not just say your side, but listen and discern from that.
Plato
But-
said the penalty for not becoming involved in politics is you end up being ruled by your inferiors. And
Exactly.
our whole life, we've been told you don't want to get involved in politics. That's yucky and mucky. Yeah,
No.
guess what? The good people aren't getting involved in politics because it's yucky and mucky. And what do we end up with? Yucky and mucky people running politics. That's we have to re-engage. We have to get our shovels out and start shoveling the muck.
Well, so you were saying that today in the barber shop. I must have drank too much coffee, and I made the comment to actually a full house of people that were intellectually engaged in this conversation. And I said, Solomon once said, the greatest of all philosophers once said, and I would argue number 2 philosopher would be the Apostle Paul, actually. His writings are for sure the most well-known in the world today. But King Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun.
That's Ecclesiastes.
Yes. And well, absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually probably wasn't wrote by King Solomon, really. But that's another conversation. So here we go.
He's the wisest person who ever lived. You know how you know?
He
He had
said
300 wives.
and he's the one who said so. It is documented by him.
Anybody who can manage 300 wives and 600 concubines, that had to be a wise guy right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Don't even try to think about the mathematicals.
I've been married 41 years, and I'm telling you, that's a handful.
So here he is. We have these conversations and we're rehashing. But if you've ever heard 2 people that are having a conversation on nothing they know about, that's what we're doing right now. Not right now, but that's what most people are doing. They're not talking about anything that they know. Jordan Peterson said, if you want to be an expert on any one thing in the world, in the top 10%, read 5 books of one subject. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one of the greatest minds of today saying that, in my opinion.
Peterson's cool.
I like Peterson. So what I'm saying is here we have conversations that we're reinventing. When you just said Plato wrote a book,
The Republic,
called The Republic. This is not anything that we should be having a conversation about. Read the book.
Right there, it is. Right
read the book of
Right.
what an absolute. This is the first. Well, we lost the Alexandrian Library, so because of that, this isn't the first time this had been ever thought of. But just, I can't. Marvin, this is your fault that I'm on this tangent.
Sorry,
because we're talking about.
It's not
reading.
a tangent. It's central to the issue.
Read the book. This is not new. If you want to talk about something, know of what you speak. Our founding fathers had people say, oh, they had great foresight. No, they had hindsight and they were extremely smart. You said something else, Doc. During the Dark Ages, people traveled within 50 miles of their home. That was considered a big trip.
Yes.
They lived in single family dwellings.
Yes.
The average you didn't leave your village without armed guards, armed people with you, because you were going to get robbed and killed and raped. That's just
Of
a
course.
fact.
Yes. By highwaymen. Yes.
Yes. And anyways, I mean, I know everyone here knows this, but maybe there's a viewer or 2 that don't know. So these people were in a horrible state. Then the King James Bible came out. And by the way, their vocabulary was 500 words or less. Some people argue 300 words or less. The King James Bible came out and it soared to 10,000 words, with the farmers using High English that was not being used for years before that.
Right.
And all the way up into 1934 and some people say 1940s, that stayed with a 10,000 vocabulary. Now, Marvin, what you were saying there is scary because today we are back at 500 to 700 words
Right.
in our vocabulary.
Right. We're becoming illiterate.
We are becoming, excuse me, I'm kind of on a tangent here, but the inventor of the electric car,
Tesla.
thank you, his name,
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Elon Musk just did a video here just recently saying that technology doesn't always move forward. Oftentimes, history shows us it moves back, it recedes. If we went to the moon in 1964, someone correct me if I'm
69.
wrong. 69, thank you. Why haven't we done it again? Like
We
wait a
couldn't if
minute.
we wanted. We don't have the infrastructure necessary. I'm a physicist. Ask me about it.
Okay,
Another
So-
discussion.
but
the
you,
NASA
you-
program, and yeah,
but the NASA program has kind of been a flop in some ways.
Not kind of.
Yeah,
Oh.
massively. And
Yeah.
then here's a private industry that is just killing it. And I'm on a tangent here. But what
Yes,
I'm
you are.
saying is we are absolutely ignorant. One of my heroes, he once said, Mark Twain, a man that does not read has no advantage over a man that cannot read. Get some books under you. Get some books under you. Get educated. I am sorry, I'm getting diarrhea of the mouth.
Before they burn them.
But that's why you run a podcast, because you got
That's right.
you got to have a place to do your mouth stuff.
That's right.
So that book was just on the shelf. I didn't even think of that beforehand.
Yeah.
But
I don't
anyways.
want people to get depressed, but we're in a bad place in our country, and it's almost like it has to get bad in order for it to get good.
Yes.
And I like what Mike Lindell says. You know, he says 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this time and we're going to see that everything had to happen in order for us to realize what a bad state we're in. And I would say, you know, for example, I was just in Southern California. The city I was in was lawless. And I don't mean, you know, there's a few homeless people here and there. I'm saying you couldn't go from point A to point B safely without guards, okay? Because they're lawless. It's just like you described. There are highwaymen everywhere, and you will be mugged and you will be raped, and it is not safe. And that is not only Redlands where I was. That is Portland, and that is Seattle, and that is a lot of our major cities around the country are becoming more and more lawless. It's not in San Francisco. It used to be the gem of the West Coast. That place is literally a pile of crap. Literally a pile of crap. And it's not a good situation. So in other words, we're declining. We're still in decline, but that decline is causing people to wake up. And so it's a race. It's a race between how fast we can wake up and be redeemed, or whether we're just going to lose our country. In the back of my Thompson Chain Bible, there's a graph, and it maps out 450 years of Israel, and it's basically walking you through the Kings and the Chronicles, showing when they were redeemed and when they descended into depravity, and then they would be redeemed and descended into depravity. After 450 years, they were captured by the Babylonians, and that was the end of Israel, right? So the question is are we going to be redeemed, or is it going to be the end of America? And God's either going to judge us or redeem us, but it depends on us. And I always tell people, I wish it was like me being Jonah and I could go to Nineveh and they would repent in a day, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're in a process, and that process is a waking up process. I hope you're right. The millennials are waking up. By the way, there's something that confirms that. Otto von Bismarck said, anyone who's not a socialist by age 19 has no heart. And anyone who's not a capitalist by age 30 has no brain. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is what's happening is those millennials that were lied to that you're talking about, they're going to get a first-hand education in how capitalism is able to provide and socialism is not. So they're going to be flipping. They're going to be converting. And hopefully that'll be part of our turning and recovery as a country. So all this stuff you're saying is right on target.
Well, I really like you. I didn't really know this part of you, but Rush Limbaugh wrote a book, and that book was actually children's literature on Thanksgiving. And
Yeah, I know. I've read it.
Isn't that a phenomenal book?
Yeah, I miss Rush. I got to tell you something about Rush. I went to Mar-a-Lago in January. I was there, and I walked into the Great Hall in Mar-a-Lago, and in the middle, there's this beautiful carved walnut table. Gorgeous. I mean, it's probably, it's a masterpiece. And in the middle of it is this beautiful statue, gorgeous sculpture of an eagle, American eagle. And I walked up to it because I wanted to admire it. And it's one of the only things in the whole room. You walk up, and on the bottom, there's a plaque. It says dedicated to Rush Limbaugh. And as I was looking at that, it occurred to me. It's like in a moment, it's like everything made sense to me. If Rush were alive today, we would not be having this discussion. It would be on the radio every day. It would be discussed every day. What it tells you is it tells you that all those other people that were riding in his wake are a bunch of limp noodles, and they are not our heroes. And Sean Hannity is not our friend.
No.
And Tucker only is just starting to see the light. The guy's been a traitor for a long time. I know, because Mike Lindell offered him a job and he turned it down, even offered him a raise, because on Fox, they're not allowed to tell the truth. Those guys, there's like a list of 15 things that they're not allowed to talk about, or they lose their jobs. So in other words, those guys are limp noodles. We don't have that clear conservative voice that we used to have with Rush. So I'm really glad you brought Rush up, because that is a huge problem. Our media suppresses all of this. For example, when I give my talks, I tell people stuff that's happening around the country, and people look at me like, where did you hear that? I'm like, I was there. I watched it happen. And they're like, well, we didn't hear it in the news. You're listening to the wrong news, and the media is suppressing it. I mean, are you aware, for example, that the Speaker of the House, Robin Vos, stood in front of 10 television cameras, admitted to the world that there's widespread fraud in Wisconsin, far more than the margins of victory in that state? Are you aware of that? No. How come? You're listening to the wrong news, and the mainstream media is not reporting it. Are you aware that the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania admitted formally in writing that their election was certified illegally because they had more ballots than voters? People don't know this. Why don't you know this? Because effectively the legislature the mainstream media has suppressed all of this information. People say all the time, oh, Dr. Frank, there's no court cases. There's no evidence. Are you kidding? I've testified in 6 already. There's all kinds of evidence and all kinds of court evidence that people just don't know about. Why? Because they're too lazy to look it up for themselves. They're expecting the mainstream media to report it to them. Saddest thing I've heard in months, a lady came up to me the other day and she says, Dr. Frank, my father's never going to believe any of this until it's reported on Fox. Saddest things I ever heard, because they're not going to report it on Fox.
No, they're not.
How about that for a rant?
And that's things about North Dakota is, if you look at it, our 3 major sources for media here, all of our newspapers are Lee Enterprises, our 2 major different, the NBC and CBS, they're all owned by out-of-state companies, out-of-state interests. So all of our media is controlled. So an article that you guys will see in Dickinson will be in the Forum, it'll be in the Bismarck paper, it'll be in Minot. And there's so much that is opinion that gets passed as truth,
right?
So widespread that's where, the small presses, the small newspapers, like the paper, the podcast, that's where that stuff's important, because if you talk to these small town newspapers, there's a very real fear that town's history is going to be forgotten.
Well, and just like with this show, I mean, this was just 2 guys getting together wanting to, be funny, I guess, and it's turned into what it has. And I'm surprised at, how many people have reached out to us saying, keep it up. We're watching. You guys keep doing what you're doing. It's been pretty phenomenal, actually. And I'm surprised at some of the people that have approached me, because, some of them, we don't have the same views, and that's okay.
Perfectly fine. We can disagree and have a beer together afterwards. That's exactly America right there, baby.
Yep. You're right.
And I can even have a pop with you if you drink beer. Um, so back what we were talking about with why I brought up Rush Limbaugh
Yeah.
is
Sorry, I
because
took that off topic, but I
Oh,
just couldn't
no,
resist
no.
that moment.
no, I'm so glad you actually went that direction. So Rush Limbaugh with Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea of Thanksgiving was they were celebrating
Yes.
the fact of the matter that they understood that this commune wasn't working.
Right.
Communism wasn't working.
Right.
Socialism wasn't working.
Right.
Thanksgiving is my favorite meal, not meal, but holiday because it's probably the only not actual pagan holiday, and it really comes down to celebrating freedom,
Yeah.
understanding was enlightenment of plenty of food for all. Capitalism. That's what it was. It was capitalism.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me that, like we're reinventing, like something that happened in the barbershop a couple days ago is, okay, if my father would have listened to everything that his father listened to and his grandfather, my dad would have been flawless. And if I would have listened to my dad and my grandfather, well, I'd even be more flawlesser, if that's a word. But that doesn't work that way. We repeat. We can, and as a country, we are doing this over and over and over again. And I just see, now the whole Thanksgiving thing coming up.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, here we are. We didn't learn our lesson here at all.
Well,
Right.
not one bit.
I need to put a pot in the cow room. Sorry about that.
No, that's no problem.
What was that?
I need to put a coffee pot in the cow room.
Oh, and something that you said, Doc, that really, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves,
Chronicles.
pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will heal their land. This is the answer. It is the answer. It is the answer.
So my favorite metaphor in this situation, because I think we have identified the problem pretty clearly, is, David went to fight Goliath. He didn't go to fight Goliath. He went to take lunch to his brothers. Yeah. But when he showed up, he noticed he was dropped in the middle of this interesting situation, and he couldn't believe the situation he found himself in. But along the route from, to bring lunch to his brothers, he fought the lion and the bear. So God prepared him along the way. God equipped him along the way. And I think what we all need to do is we need to find ourselves in this revolting development, in this situation. And we need to go, wait a minute, how do we get in this situation? Okay. Or what tools has God prepared us with? Because we have to address Goliath now. Now, the nice thing is that I don't have to win the battle. David didn't have to win the battle. He even said, the battle's the Lord's. So we just have to be willing to use the gifts God has given us and step up and throw our stones. And, if each of us has a sling we bring, and it's different. I have math skills and science skills and speaker skills. I bring my slings to the battle. Maybe somebody else brings their history or their accounting or their numbers or whatever it is. Everybody needs to bring their skills to bear here, because God doesn't bring challenges before us without equipping us with what we need. And the other beautiful thing about it is that God uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. So God, please make me more foolish, man. Let's mess these guys up. Let's really mess them up.
Yeah.
But the battle isn't ours. So the cool thing is that we don't have to worry about the outcome. We have to worry about the process. I loved what Marvin was saying. He didn't have to win. He engaged the process. If we all just engage, and by the way, I don't think we're going to have any trouble getting volunteers at polls in the future now. I think people are waking up. People are going to be turning out like crazy all over the country because they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so people are waking up, getting involved. And I think by 2024, this country should be wide awake at the polls, and we should be having paper poll books and paper ballots in a lot of places. We're systematically heading that way.
Yeah.
The scripture says, I fought a good race.
Paul.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And my pastor tells a story. He said a little boy went home and he said, "Dad, Goliath was really, really brave." And he's thinking, well, he must have misunderstood his Sunday school teacher or something, the preacher. And he goes, "No, son, no, David was brave." He goes, "Oh, no, Goliath was brave." And he said, "No, Goliath was a giant." He goes, Dad, David had God on his side.
Right, exactly.
Like this, we are God's children.
Yes.
We've always been outnumbered. We've been fighting the same enemies.
Yes.
When Jesus Christ came back, Nero was walking the streets of Rome, marrying a 14-year-old little boy, and Nero was dressed up as a girl. This is nothing new under the sun for us.
No.
We have been fighting these battles for a long time.
Right.
And this is who we are. And you are absolutely right, Doc. We need to find who we are through him.
Yeah.
And that will embolden you. That will embolden you.
Yeah.
Boy, I feel like preaching.
No.
Well,
Hey, that's where it was happening in 1776, baby. The churches and the taverns. So, and I don't, people say, well, thanks for fighting for our country, Dr. Frank. And it's true. I'm out there every day fighting, but I'm really not fighting for our country per se. I'm fighting for the values that our country stands for. And if our country doesn't stand for those values, countries come and go. Why would I give my life for something that's transient? I'm dedicating my life to something that's eternal, that's transcendent. The values that we're fighting for, the ideas of liberty, the idea of good and evil. That's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah.
so my dad, I love my dad, is famous for all sorts of sayings, but during this last couple of years, one that's kept me going, and it may help other people too. Just because we are in a very dark time. I've been getting messages for the last 3 days about how down people are. But when it gets to times like this, I always remember one thing he said, and that's, we the unwilling, led by the unknowing, have done so much for so long with so little. We're now able to create everything from nothing. And we need to create momentum. We need to stand up and be involved.
Yep.
I know it's a mouthful, but
No, it's a good one.
Well, gentlemen, we've been on for hour and 45 minutes. Time
Is that
flies
good?
when we're having fun. It is.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. Thank you
Yes,
so
so
much for
much.
joining us, both of you.
Yep.
My
yeah,
pleasure. You said something I wanted to comment a second ago. You said you're just a couple of guys went on having fun, and now it's turned into something else.
Yeah.
In Ohio, where I live, we had these twice a week. Our governor was getting online for pressers, they're called, right? Press conference. And he would get up and he would tell everybody, how many people died of COVID that day, and how many people, it was like, when they were pressers.
Our
And so
governor did the same
we
thing.
started a little podcast in Ohio called the Ohio Post Depressor. And it grew rapidly. We had like 5,000 people watching us a day. It was on twice a week. It was very successful. And we used it as a weapon in our state. And we exposed scandal after scandal. We exposed all kinds of things. It really, it persists to this day, even though I had to step away from it to do this work. But you guys don't underestimate how powerful of a tool you could be. You could be one of the key elements in the restoration of your state.
Well, we certainly hope so. That's what we're aiming for, whether Luke wants to admit it or not.
Well, I
Well,
personally,
you're a small state, so you may not get 5,000 viewers in a day, but if you got 500,
I personally think we should probably advertise the show as people with sleep apnea that need a little bit more of a nap or something. But he seems to think that people are watching us out there in YouTube land and Facebook and such.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Don't put this on YouTube.
Oh, they'll pull you.
They will take your site down. They hate Dr. Frank. I should have warned you beforehand. Are you streaming live on YouTube right now?
We are.
Oh boy. Okay. I should have warned you. I didn't even think of it till just
No.
then. You can't find me on YouTube because they hate me, and you don't want to get taken down. So as soon as this is done, get it downloaded and put it and take it off and put it onto Rumble. Otherwise,
I'm working on that too.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. I don't want you to lose your sight. They'll take you down. I promise.
Well, Doc, that's an interesting concept. So this comedian, this redheaded gal that's holding, a severed head of our president, President Trump,
Yeah.
Our previous president. I didn't like that. I didn't find it funny. I didn't find it funny, but I certainly think in a free country, she has the right to do that. I didn't think she was like saying, hey, we should kill anybody. I thought like, whatever. It was out of taste, poor taste, whatever. So she gets kicked off of Twitter now. I just seen. Now, in my view, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I don't think she should have got kicked off of Twitter. Honestly, I am of the view of a libertarian viewpoint of freedom of
First Amendment, baby.
Yeah, if you're a neo-Nazi, you should have the right.
Absolutely.
And so people can see your ignorance.
Yeah,
like that's how I feel about it. That's just open. If you control the thought process, you are controlling the free speech process is what you're doing.
That's correct.
The free thought process. But anyways, you said that, and I'm just like, we are living in a free country where YouTube was actually pulling you down. If you're a nutcase, wouldn't that be a good thing to put you on? I mean, like, people should be able to see through that.
Yeah.
Show of hands who's been banned on Facebook.
What's that?
Show of hands who's been banned on Facebook.
Oh,
Of course. I had 150,000 people following me every day during COVID on Facebook. I had a Facebook page because they were coming there to get their graphs for their current status in the epidemic, because it just follows Farr's law. It's a simple differential equation. And so I was modeling every county. I had it pretty much automated so people would know right where they stood in the epidemic. And that went down. They took that down in October, a month before the election, because people were asking me about the election, and I was showing my models for the election. Trump was 20-1, and they took it down. The thing that finally took me down was that I posted a graph, and there's a 2-axis graph. It showed risk of vaccine versus time. And I was showing that when they develop, by the way, I'm an expert at vaccines. I've consulted with multiple companies on this. When you first introduce a vaccine, there's always casualties because they're unanticipated side effects with a certain population. So over time, they become safer and safer and safer. And then, of course, there's a benefit to a vaccine. How many people did you save from a vaccine? And so there's a graph you can make. And then I graphed on the same chart. I showed the risks from COVID. And all of it was from, standard epidemiological models and the official numbers. And I showed using the graph that nobody should ever get vaccinated, ever.
Yeah.
There was always a higher risk than it was a benefit. Now, that's not saying that some people won't get better, but on average, and children should absolutely never even come close to it. So in other words, I showed the mathematics, just standard math. That was it, man. They took me off. That was it.
Yeah. Doc, on my Facebook, Luke Simons for North Dakota. I'm a former state legislator, and I'm the only legislator. Hey,
there you go.
You are talking to somebody. I am the only legislator in the state of North Dakota ever to be expelled out of the state legislature, and I am the only state legislator ever in the history of the United States of America to ever be expelled without due process. Zero.
How did that happen?
That's another story for another day.
Okay.
But on my page, on my little round button on the Facebook page, I have the Minuteman, in the field, and it says expelled and censored. And then, and the story is, and if you go on my page at all, it always says to get kicked out of the state or to get kicked off or censored off Facebook, mention COVID. To get kicked out of the state legislature, take a picture of the voting record. And that's
Oh, I hear you.
that's what got me. That's what got me. And
That's
so it's complete censorship.
13.
What,
I think
what's your last name again, Luke? I'll look you up and make you a friend.
Luke Simons.
Luke Simons. I've got Facebook let me keep my own personal page, and I had 5,000 friends, forever because it was at the limit. But they just upgraded me to a professional without me asking. So suddenly now I'm able to. I've got like 15,000 followers again on Facebook. I didn't even try. So I'll connect up with you there. That'll be fun.
I forgot to ask you. That would be great, by the way. I forgot to ask you. So how did you guys, like somebody like, as soon as I heard about Mike Lindell,
Yeah.
I went out and bought one of his pillows right away because I just wanted to support him.
Sure.
But how did you guys meet up? I mean, did he just call you out of the blue or what? How did this happen?
Well, remember when the Supreme Court cases got rejected from Montgomery County? I was really pissed off. And Kathy Barnett, who I was volunteering for at the time, she said, well, just by coincidence, I met Mike Lindell last week. I'll introduce you to him. And so she called the attorney, and the attorney arranged that meeting where I got to give. Did I tell you that story earlier where I got to give the okay, so what happened was they set up a Zoom conference, and I was supposed to present my evidence to about 16 attorneys in a Zoom conference. It's all the attorneys, like Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, all those guys. And I gave my test. It went into 4 hours instead of just 1 hour. It was a good sign. And the next morning, Mike Lindell's attorney called me and said, hey, we want you in studio as soon as we can get you there. And so I flew down and had dinner with Mike. And then the next morning, I sat there in studio with him. I was supposed to film for about we had 2 hours of studio time, and it was supposed to be 1 hour where I teach him what I had been doing, and then 1 hour he was filming, and then he was going to take 20 minutes out of that and put it in his next movie, Absolute Interference. But after about 5 minutes of me he stood up and he told the cameras, erase everything. We're going to do a whole hour just on Dr. Frank's work. And then we filmed for 3.5 hours together. And that he edited an hour of that into scientific proof. And then he took another half an hour out of that 3.5 hours and put that in Absolute Interference. So that's when I first met Mike. And then after that, he used me as a reference point and a consultant on a lot of his lawsuits and things. And so I've traveled months at a time with him. Well, not continuously, but if you add it all up, I've slept in his house. I've ridden in his plane with him all over the place. We're good friends. He's a good Christian man. I vouch for him. He's the real deal. He's really a lot of energy to be with, but he is a true patriot, and he inspired me. When I first met him in March of 2021, I was just coming on the scene, right? And he made those movies about me. And he told me that all of this stuff he was doing, he was paying for with his own money. And the reason is because he says that I can either spend it now or they're going to take it from me later. And so that inspired me. So you see, I've been traveling the country and for 45 states now. I've never charged for a single event. I'm spending my own money. But what I do is I ask people to pay my expenses. And that's been working really well. And I really like it, because then people know that I'm not in this for the money. I'm not grifting this. I'm not trying to make money from this. I'm just trying to break even. Just pay for my plane ticket. Sometimes I stay in people's homes. I usually prefer to stay in hotels because of security issues. And, I don't want to end up as Potiphar, with Potiphar's wife. So, it's very smart for me to stay in hotels. And most of the time people do that. And they buy my meals. They pick me up at the airports. They fly me in, they fly me out. And I have been doing this now for almost 2 years, and I'm only a little in the hole. So I'm delighted to be investing in my country, if that makes sense. I mentioned that this is not an appeal for money. This is me telling you why you should be buying Mike's stuff, because by the way, I have a slipper on. They are the best. So, and I don't have a promo code, so I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to help you help Mike. Those slippers are the best ever. I just love them. And I'm on my third pair now. I carry one in my suitcase when I travel, and I got some here at home, and I wore one out. So that tells you. Anyway, I'm rambling, but the sheets are great. The pillows are great. And Christmas is coming up. So there's an ad for you, Mike, wherever you are.
Yeah.
There's a tip to the hat for you, Mike. But, when he and I were flying around the country, we flew around together for about 3 weeks straight, visiting AG after AG. He has a really nice jet. It goes about 650 miles an hour. It's faster than commercial. And so you could drop in, visit an AG, drop in, visit an AG, just zoom, zoom, zoom around the country. It was awesome. We were showing attorneys generals their own data, hacking into their systems right in front of their eyes. It was impressive that we were able to do that, but it was also very eye-opening for me because I learned in that process that our AGs already know they have all this fraud. Our secretaries of states already know they have all this fraud. Our legislatures already know they have this fraud, and they're not interested in fixing it. It's the old rule of government, right? You never give government power, because if you do, you'll never get it back. Not even for 3 weeks to flatten the curve. You never give the government power. And that's what's happened is now our governments own our elections, and they ain't giving them back without a fight, because right now they can control everything. So, I could tell you story after story, which I do in my talks. But I've only been to North Dakota once. You guys got to come next time.
Yeah.
Or have me back another time and I'll tell you more stories. Or I can tell you another story now, whatever you want to hear.
Definitely.
Tomorrow morning I have to do a deposition though, so I shouldn't stay.
Well, I'm involved with a group called the Sons of Liberty.
Oh, that's a great group.
Yeah, and this is Sons of Liberty in North Dakota. It was started by two guys up there in the Tioga area, and we've had people. We had constitutional study, Paul Engel.
Yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, we've had him a couple times. Maybe we
have
can
me up and charge $10 a head, and it pays for the plane ticket, and we're done.
Yeah, maybe we can do that.
Yeah, I'd be delighted. I'm booked about 2 months in advance though, so you got to plan it.
Okay. Would you like to be back on the show here in a couple months?
Whatever you like. I'm happy to come. I never say no to an interview because I'm spreading the gospel, baby.
Yeah. Let's we'll be in touch and we'll set something else.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
I want to hear from Marvin. What's your next step? Because you're obviously super critical in this.
We're working on it.
Okay. I want you to know that if you want my help, I'm there.
Awesome. My big focus right now, it started in 2020. I'm telling people we need to push for it again in 2021. We got to start taking back our districts. And so my big focus is going to be legislative districts and educating people on Robert's rules and getting information out there, because if you don't like your candidates that are running, if you don't like the way your districts run, you got to be involved.
Are you doing that through the precinct strategy?
We are just starting to look at everything.
That is huge. Nebraska took over their entire GOP. The grassroots took over their GOP through the precinct strategy. You guys want to look into that. If you have precincts, committeemen and committeewomen, precinct captains, that's a huge way to take back your state.
Yep. And so I'm not really sure which direction we're going next.
All right. Well, if you need me, I'm there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
I'm proud of you for running too. People keep saying, what office are you running for, Dr. Frank? Are you kidding? I don't have time to run for nothing. I'm running around the country, but I love it when I see people stepping up, and I'm happy to support them. That's why Charles Tuttle had me up there. Absolutely. I'm there. He's definitely a strange character, but I love the guy because he's genuine and he's doing what he should and he's effective. It's amazing. So I was delighted to stand at his side. I endorsed him, actually.
Yeah, I seen that. It's interesting because people think, oh, I'm not electable. I'm not this. I'm not that.
Yeah.
Was her name Dorcas? It was a lady that in the New Testament, she died, and they went and got the apostles. But the apostle Paul just died, and they didn't ask to bring him back from the dead, but they prayed that she would come back from the dead because she made blankets and she was the nicest soul in the whole church. And I'm going somewhere with that. People don't think that they're now, Doc, you wouldn't know about this, but there was a guy named Ralph Meskey, and Ralph wrote letters to the editor everywhere. He was not electable. He passed away now. But he was not an electable person, but he wrote very good letters to every state newspaper there was, every city newspaper, and people everywhere read Ralph's letters. He was effective. That's politics. You don't have to be elected to be into politics.
That was the gift God gave him. That was the sling God gave him. If we all use our slings, man, that's all we got to do.
That's right. You are so right. The Bible talks about different talents.
Yeah, of course.
And if you don't use your talent that is specific to you, it is a big deal. I one time, you may have met Dr. Rick Becker, just ran for U.S. Senate against John Hoeven. It's like a Ron Paul in North Dakota, just an amazing man.
I didn't meet him yet.
Oh, you'd really like to meet
North
him.
Dakota was not very friendly to Mike and I. I don't think we didn't drop in there.
Oh, really?
No. There were some states that didn't want anything to do with us.
Oh,
North Dakota's one of them.
That's too bad. Now we know why.
Yeah.
Oh no, your Secretary of State, he's a limp noodle, man. You need to get rid of him.
Oh,
I guess he's leaving anyway. This is his last year, I understand.
Yeah, we are well aware of what we have there.
Yeah, it's no, that was. I'd almost rather have somebody who believes something different than me and will make a stand, and then we can have an argument. No, this guy's just a limp noodle.
Yeah, he's getting his orders from the governor, and our governor is getting his orders from Bill Gates. That's how that's working. And
I figured that out while I was there.
Yeah. So, anyways, he makes Facebook videos, and they're very effective, and he's very elegant. Everything he does is elegant. And I'm just this rancher barber guy, and I'm just I'm making words up as I go along, and I pronounce everything wrong. I'm dyslexic. And I told him, I said, I hate doing videos because you're so good at it. And he goes, Luke, we are talking to two different demographics. You're effective in what you do.
Yes.
You do what you do. Don't you dare stop. And we motivate each other.
Right.
And that's how this works. Get off the couch, man. You're effective. Ladies, make some cookies for your neighbor kids and just give them a little trinket. It's like a brush fire in the minds of men. And if you start this,
you're quoting Samuel Adams.
That's exactly it. It is exactly it. Funny enough, my dad one time, we were way over. My dad one time, he asked me, he said, Luke, how did you get these extreme views in politics? He said, because I'm not that extreme. He is now. But what happened is he was working on a guy's house, and this guy was out by Sterling, North Dakota, out in the middle of nowhere, a 3-story house. And my dad was siting this by himself. And when he did that, this guy was like a John Bircher back in the day, which I love John Birchers. They're constitutionally sound people.
They've hosted about a dozen of my events.
Absolutely. The John Birchers are probably one of the biggest. John Wayne was a John Bircher. Ronald Reagan was a John Bircher. Yeah. Anyways, that being said, we had, he would go around, and my dad would be working on this guy's house, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, John Adams once said, and he would make a quote. Well, my dad's very smart. So we would work with my dad from a young age, and he'd come along and goose us, and he would say these quotes. And I without even blinking, I said, Dad, that guy that you worked with that I never met, you would tell me these quotes all the time, and it was just like branded into my head.
Yes.
And everything I questioned, everything all the time, like, wait a minute. Police officer, where are you saying? You say I have to show you my gun? What? Where?
Yeah.
Who said that?
Right.
And it branded me. And that, anyways, folks, we got to go.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be with you guys.
it was
Yeah,
so
It was
fun,
our
guys.
pleasure.
Yes.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
We will be in touch.
Go ahead, Marvin.
Very awesome to meet you, Dr. Frank. I've heard a lot of good things. Luke,
Well, thanks, Marvin.
as always, it's amazing to see you guys. Anytime you need me, let me know.
Oh,
You
that'd be
bet.
fast. We'll have you on again, Marvin. Doctor, thank you so much for your time. We understand
pleasure.
that your time is very valued. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And by the way, if you've got my email now, can you send me some of that stuff that you were showing of Marvin's? I'd like to have a look at it. I think it's very good stuff.
Actually, we can even do better yet. Marvin is like kind of an untold superpower. And
I'm noticing this.
I'm not going to get into details, but he did get me kicked out of the legislature, and he can explain that to you in private. But he had a big deal. He was feeding me with a lot of information and another thing too. And I'm not going to get into that. Marvin, I'm not bitter.
I know we talk about it all the time, Luke.
Yeah, we do. So, anyways, what we'll do is we will get the two of you together.
Okay, good.
Because
Absolutely.
he's kind of the guy that maybe Charles talks about a lot of things, and
Charles Tuttle, yeah.
and he sues and he does a good thing, but
Oh,
this
yeah.
is the other guy that you're going to
Gotcha.
really like in North Dakota. So,
Well, so we'll have an access.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you all.
Thank
Tune
you.
in next Thursday at 7 Mountain Time, Man Time, and you Flatlanders, you can turn in at 8 o'clock Central Time. So, Flatlanders.
I got like 20 inches of snow outside. I got to figure out what I'm doing with in the morning. So,
Oh, you guys have snow already?
Oh man,
Kind of a blizzard. See, us Westerners are just rolling around in that snow and just melting it. That's just how it works.
rolling around in
Yeah,
it. Really?
yeah. Basically, we're like Sasquatches up here.
He
We're
sent
tough
William
as all-
out to shovel the front of the
So,
barber shop.
well,
I
he's
don't
from the
think-
east.
I
He
don't
had
think
to.
you're rolling.
Folks, love you all.
Love you guys. Thanks again.
Thanks, man.
yeah, but
Bye.